Sometimes it's one day, sometimes it's 1 year or an entire decade, but the hip hop industry has a history for releasing new music, either a song or an album, after an artist has passed away. And that started the ongoing debate of posthumous albums in hip hop, and if it's ethical or not to put out music after an artist has passed away. And you guys can join the conversation in the comments and let us know your thoughts on this debate, because it's been around since the 90s after, artists such as Biggie and Tupac had passed away. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, to say the least.
It's a very interesting conversation because there's a lot of different moving parts that go into it. And obviously, we have limited knowledge because we're not a part of the camps, or we don't understand, let's say, the executive decisions that have been made within these posthumous releases. So there's always room for conversation and debate. But guys, listen, a little disclaimer for the Patreon members. You guys have early access to tomorrow's episode. It is live now on our Patreon account. So you guys get access that in the link in the description. The link is now live. So go there if you want to see it. But going back on this posthumous topic, it's touchy, and not a lot of people talk about it because it could come off disrespectful at times, especially when someone passes away. But I think what we're going to do for this conversation is just declare this: we're not talking any sort of smack about any of these artists. They have nothing to do with this, and their legacies will live on forever, regardless of the material that has been put out after their passing. So that has to be said before we start this conversation. Not only that, but a lot of you guys have been asking for this, so we're going to give our takes on it. And I'm going to start you off like this, man. Do you think that it comes to a point where, let's say, the camps have invested so much time and energy into the artist that, let's say, they feel as if, we were riding so much on this artist to, let's say, feed our families and to, let's say, put food on the table, that now we have to take this posthumous route in order to continue?
Well, that's the thing, is that to me, when it comes down to this topic of the posthumous albums, there's 4 different perspectives, right? So there's the fan perspective. There's the artist perspective, who of course doesn't really, have the opportunity to see any of this happen. Then we have the label's perspective and the estate's perspective, right? The people that have hopefully the creative control over the music and the vault that the artist left behind. But in terms of the label, yes, they might have invested their time and their marketing dollars into certain artists, but that doesn't mean that they have, the freedom to use this artist's name for the music that they want, just to, make an extra dollar or two. You know what I mean? That shouldn't be the case. But we're going to be taking you guys through the good versus the bad, because we've had good, rollouts for these posthumous albums, and we've had camps that haven't handled it with too much grace. And then we'll kind of move into also the different perspectives. So to you, what was, let's say, an example of a very good camp that handled a situation for a posthumous album in, the right care?
Mac Miller's.
Yeah.
What a beautiful rollout for Circles. Like this, well, first of all, Circles was I believe 80% completed by Mac Miller and John Bryan before it had actually been put out, and John Bryan had actually had executive decisions on Swimming, and that there was a trilogy being worked in the mix of it. So there was actually a sort of backstory to it, and Mac Miller had a lot of influence on it. So yes, I do believe musically that's what Mac Miller would have wanted to put out, and the camp was very, 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 I would say, careful of the type of material they put out, because it came out almost, I believe, a year and a couple of months so after. So they took their time with it, and it wasn't a grand rollout. Like, they weren't putting out crazy commercials everywhere, and they weren't.
That's why I respected it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Like, that's why I respect it too, is because it didn't feel forced down your throat. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I have to go listen to this album because they're guilt tripping me to go listen to it. I genuinely wanted to hear what Mac was working on, because I was a massive fan of Swimming, and when I heard that it was in the right hands and that it was being created by a legendary music producer and engineer, I had to go back and listen to it, because it left me wondering what could have been, and then I got a beautiful album, so it kind of completed it for me. How about you?
It was all his vision. That's what I love in that, the rollout was so minimalistic, because we just got this very personal letter written by his family on, posted on Mac Miller's Instagram page, saying Mac Miller wanted his fans to hear this music. He worked on the vast majority of this material, and he was planning on this for a while. He had the album title in mind. He had worked on all the songs, and they just released Good News as a single, put out that letter, and that was it. We got the album, and they announced it to be his final album, and that's just so respectable, because that project fulfills Mac's vision, and there's nothing extra. There's nothing that they're merging together and making up for in terms of, let's say, half completed verses, or, you know, mixing this hook with this verse and forming a song out of it. No, this was all Mac's vision, and that's why it was so respectable. And another example of, you know, an artist camp that is taking the same kind of care and consideration is actually Nipsey Hussle. And his close collaborator Jay Stone recently hopped on a podcast, and he had said how, you know, it's been, you know, years now that since Nipsey tragically passed away, but they're taking their time to really craft something that, you know, will speak to his legacy. And with every Nipsey Hussle album, each project was, you know, taken with a very educated mindset, and it always had a purpose. And they want this posthumous album to be purposeful, and that's a really another good example. But let's move on now to the bad, because unfortunately with these posthumous albums, you know, the camps aren't, you know, taking... the camps are kind of taking matters into their own hands and not thinking about the legacy of the artists and the perspective of the fans.
I think one camp that we have to mention is Tupac Shakur's, like, especially after, you know, he passed away. Like, there was obviously room for posthumous material after. Apparently he had all kinds of songs vaulted and there was all kinds of stuff, but there was just too much, you know, posthumous material. Not only that, but there's more posthumous material than there are of actual Tupac material that he put out and that he actually completed. So I think that's where I was kind of frustrated with it, was like, you know, I'm a mega Tupac fan and I feel as if, like, you guys are just trying to, you know, cash grab me right now.
It was
like,
album after album, man. I mean, and like the material wasn't great, and what they ended up doing was, like, you know, putting features with people that, you know, Tupac would have never worked with, and it just, they replaced certain beats. And at a certain point, I mean, now if you look at his discography, there are more posthumous albums than there are albums that he made when he was alive and well. So to me, that's an exploitation of the artist for me, and it doesn't sit well. And I feel like, you know, it doesn't affect the artist's legacy, because real Tupac fans know that, you know, that is not going to define him and his catalog. You know what I mean? Like, those albums are just, like, fuck those albums. Don't even consider them his work at the end of the day.
And I think that's, like, the big part about this whole narrative is, like, what do you even consider a part of his catalog or not? Because a lot of camps, like, you know, gamble with the legacies of their artists. Like, you're legitimately putting their name on there and saying, okay, this is a X artist's album, or this is his album. Like, you know, you can't really, like, there's a sort of question that has to be answered there, like, who are you guys to necessarily do that? Like, you know, especially when it comes to an artistic decision, or let's say a creativity or a vision, like, that has to stem from the artist. And, like, when you're even doing, like, voice manipulations, like, that's what they were doing with Tupac. Was at a certain point, like, I believe he shouted out The Game on a certain song, and they like
shouted out G Unit,
like G Unit, and, like, ended up manipulating his voice. And I was like, yo,
what are you doing?
Like, what are you guys doing? Like, at this point, like, you guys are just trying to use his name and make that, you know, crazy cash grab. And at the end of the day, like, you don't know their financial situations, but you're exploiting a dead person's legacy.
You always have to hope that these artists, you know, manage to have control and the rights over their masters, because with King Von, you know, thank God his family, because, you know, King Von owned his own masters, so thank God his family will be able to, you know, be in the control room for what will go out, and they'll be able to, you know, really make, you know, put out music that his fans would have wanted.
They've handled that situation perfectly, by the way, too.
Yeah, 100%.
Shout out to them.
So, I mean, that's always good. I mean, but back to camps that haven't, you know, managed it too well. XXXTentacion's name always comes up in these conversations, and how could it not? I mean, we got two posthumous albums. We got Skins and Bad Vibes Forever, and just two of the worst, you know, posthumous albums we've ever received. A lot of the material sounded unfinished, and again, they're meshing shit together, and it just doesn't sound right to me.
What was the thing with his, you know, the car that he had tragically passed away? And I believe they created a museum around all of his personal possessions and all that sort of stuff. And they had the BMW i8
that he was killed in, man.
Yeah, like, and they put it in a fucking museum for ticket sales.
It's an art exhibit now. Whoa. And, like, it's weird because his family's kind of behind all that, which is, you know, it doesn't quite make sense. And it's weird that, you know, the lengths that people will go to just to, you know, make an extra dollar. But on the other side of things, I mean, of course, you want to see the family prosper and thrive. You want to see the family and the estate really benefit from the fruits of the artist's labor. You know what I mean? Like, this artist put in so much work to build up their catalog and their name, and that hard work deserves to be, remembered at the end of the day, and it deserves to, you should cash in on that at the end of the day.
No, yeah, absolutely, because they probably left that material there for their family to reap the benefits off of. Like, if I'm in that situation, like, I would want my family to, have money for the generations to come.
Even if it like brings down your name because it's not your best work, because that's the other side of it too. It's like these artists worked so hard on these songs, but I mean, maybe they weren't out for a reason. Maybe they weren't good enough. Maybe, it wasn't material they were
I feel as
comfortable
if
with.
that's too touchy of a question to answer. But
I don't
would
think
say,
it's touchy, man.
I would say,
how
like,
is it touchy?
No, but I feel uncomfortable answering it. But I would say is like I wouldn't mind if my family eats off of my catalog. Like, that's what I would want. Like,
Yeah.
I would I'm of course, like, an artist or someone personal works for their own personal accomplishments and their own sort of personal benefits. But if your family's not eating, then who's really eating at the end of the day? So
I agree with that. I do agree, but at the same time, to me, like, I don't know. I'll give you like an analogy. Like, let's say a poet is writing sonnets down and has like different little scribbles of a few lines that he wrote down, for a poetry book that he wants to put out. They're just different poems. He writes down different pieces and then tragically passes away. And then the publisher or whoever else matches one part of, a line with another different sonnet and puts it together and forms a poem out of
then
it.
of
Like,
course not.
That's
That's
the
not
same thing
ethical.
with this, where you're taking a verse from one song, a hook from another one, and just mix matching things and making a song out of it. Like, to me, it's not right. So it should be full songs. It should, have some consistency to it. And if not, I mean, the most important thing is that the artist actually, made the project himself and just wasn't able to put it out in time.
How do you feel about Juice WRLD's camp and the way that they've been releasing these projects? Do you feel as if it's been in the right direction, and do you feel as if the fans have been served properly and that his name has been respected properly? How do you feel about the whole situation?
Legends Never Die sold like 500K plus first week. That was huge, and I mean, that was the most successful posthumous album of the last 20 years of any genre. And now with The Party Never Ends, we're seeing that, a year later, another posthumous album comes along, and not too long ago they made a lot of money off of that project, and now they're releasing this thing in 3 different parts. Like, that rubs me the wrong way, because that's some extra fucking promotion right there. You know what I mean? Not only that, but I mean, you have Lil Uzi, who's been said like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be hopping on this project, and I get people want to hype it up, but to me, it's a big marketing stunt, and that was something that, it is something that we don't really see with any rollout nowadays, where it's released in 3 different parts. Like, it's too extra. The fans want the fucking music. Give them their 15 songs. Obviously, they won't be part of the same feeling or the same set of emotions that Juice wanted to capture for one project, but just give them the music. Don't be extravagant.
No, the fans deserve to have the music, and at the same time, the artist's name deserves to be respected at this point, because again, like, as soon as like there's all kinds of these crazy marketing stunts and all these sort of marketing rollouts that come into a posthumous album, it's like, okay, like, what are you guys really doing here? Like, obviously, we know records have to sell, but just put the music out for the fans if that's what you guys really want to do, and see how it sticks. And at the end of the day, like, you guys are still eating regardless of what the amount is. So it's a win for the fans. It's a win for the artist, because you're not disrespecting his name by putting out, half-assed material out there. And, also you guys get to get your cut out of it and really get to, benefit from it. But when you start like, teasing the album for months at a time and treating it like it's a regular rollout and doing all these crazy promotions, and
it's too much, man. At the end of the day,
it's weird, especially from like a fan's perspective. It's like, how do you want me to feel? Like, one of my favorite artists has passed away, and now you guys are trying to cash grab me with my favorite artist that's passed away. Like,
that's
it's
exactly
fucking weird.
That's exactly what I want to ask you. Actually, is that, like, from a fan's perspective? I mean, obviously, the both of us have seen some of our favorite artists tragically pass away. So, would you rather get to hear what else they were working on and what they had locked up in the vault, or would you simply prefer to, not hear any music if nothing was done completely from the artist?
This is my stance on it. I'm okay with either one.
What do you prefer? Would you prefer the extra music?
Honestly,
or not?
I'm okay. I prefer what the what the artist camp wants to do while respecting the name. Like that's what I really want out of it. Example, like a situation like Mac Miller. The last Mac Miller album I could have heard was Swimming, and I would have been completely happy with the catalog. And I would have felt like I wasn't thinking about music when Mac Miller passed away.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm trying to say. Like the same thing with Nipsey Hussle. I wasn't thinking about, oh, when am I getting new music now? No, like I don't give a fuck. Like my favorite artist just passed away, and like it's hit home. And at that point, you're like, fuck, a huge inspiration has just kind of left this world, and now I have to cherish the music even more because this is what he or she has left us with. And then it becomes a point where like, okay, now we're getting a posthumous album, but when it's something like Circles, it's beautifully done because it's super simple, it's super relaxed. Like no one's putting out crazy marketing schemes out there. And then like that's when I like it. When it starts getting fishy, as example, like Pop Smoke's posthumous album Faith. Like his first posthumous album was so fucking great because it was his vision. It was, something that he wanted to put out there that he was working on and, was really him. And then you obviously had big people, doing that whole rollout for him, like 50 Cent. But then you get something like Faith and it's just completely unfinished. And then you're sitting there like, okay, I understand that what they're trying to go after now, this is a fucking cash grab. So there's two different scenarios for me, either you take it easy and you do it ethically, or you just don't fucking do it at all, because then after that, like, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And at the end of the day, like, it's not even for us. Like, they probably don't give a fuck about us. Like, to be honest with you, for me, it's just more like respect the name. Like, they have had such a big impact and have given so much great material out there that, stop fucking around with their names. Like, you can't do that anymore. It's disrespect.
I agree. I mean, with the Pop Smoke release, that was incredible, to say the least. Incredible in a bad way, because that was the entire music industry featuring Pop Smoke. I mean, you got 21 features and only 20 performances from Pop Smoke on that album, and that was all for marketing. I mean, they uploaded that track list and they knew exactly what the fuck they were doing. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. And I mean, this is the second posthumous album, and it's been less than 2 years he's passed away. And not only that, but we've gotten 2 deluxe versions of these albums, and nobody's asking for all this music. I mean, let the man rest. And the other thing too is, like, I'm very conflicted about this because I really do believe that the family, deserves to reap the benefits of the artist's work, but maybe do that in the spirit of a greatest hits album instead. Because to me, I don't care, if it's the brother, the sister, the mother, the girlfriend of the artist is, but you don't know. You shouldn't have that creative decision to know if the artist would have put out that song or that album or that body of work.
Like imagine you're an artist and like you've been working so hard at your craft. Like, what does your mom necessarily know about, like, let's say your music?
Nobody could give that blessing.
Example,
right?
Like when you go to your mom with the podcast, like, tell me, would she be able to like fully organize your rollouts and fully organize your stuff? Like, it's that sort of conversation. I think about that. I'm like,
and there's you know the other thing too is there's too many fucking people in the room, man. Like, think about how many people you have in the room making these decisions and people bouncing ideas off of others, and it's too many
voices
at once, and there's not one vision. Not that one singular vision that you have when one artist puts out a body of work, and that's the major issue for me. So I do think that in the event of projects like Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon, or Circles, when it's the artist's vision and they put in their heart and soul into that music, it deserves to be out there. The fans need to hear that. But when that's not the case and you're scrapping and you're really, trying your hardest to dig things out of a vault, don't put it out, man.
No,
don't do disservice to the fans, and don't disservice the legacy of that artist.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters is that artist's name and, keeping that legacy alive in a very graceful and beautiful spirit. Like, listen, look at Mac Miller. There hasn't been another posthumous album or even a word of it, and it probably won't ever happen because they just know what to do with it. Like, the name will live on forever regardless, and the fans will always appreciate the music. And I think that's what we have to get out of this conversation is, like, just respect people. Like, we have to stop fucking juicing these situations. I understand it's the real world. People have bills to pay. People got to eat. But when you're doing it unethically like that, not only does it put a bad image on you, but it kind of like has a bad taint on the whole camp as a whole.
Look, man,
and that's what fucks me up.
If you want to look at, from our own perspective, it's as if like, someone would be taking different clips and different snippets of our podcast and putting out a fucking episode and just mixing and doing a bunch of edits. Like, that's what it would be like at the end of the day. It's the same thing with any type of art. When you're doing that, you're doing a whole recreation of something else that the artist didn't intend to put out. And to me, it's not justified and it's not ethical, I think, at the end of the day. So unless it's really the artist's vision, we should not be receiving that music. But guys, I mean, let us know your thoughts. Like I said earlier, this has been an ongoing debate for decades now. And I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see a resolution to it, but I do hope that these labels and, these camps handle these situations with more care.
Absolutely. And listen, this was something that we really wanted to talk about because we're often very light with our content and we don't necessarily like to get into anything that's too controversial or gossip. But, this is just something like we've seen so many camps fuck up posthumous rollouts and we're just here like, why do you guys do this?
You don't gotta try so hard.
No, like you guys don't have to do this. Like we love the artists regardless if there's no more music being released. Like I love the catalog and I'll always redive, guys. But thank you for sticking through the conversation. As always, we try to be as respectful as we can with this. And every artist that we've mentioned on here, deserves respect from their fan bases and from the hip hop industry. They have left incredible content matter for us to let's say dive into and to gain so much knowledge and let's say value from. And it's been a great conversation, guys, so we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching the video. It's always a pleasure doing content for you guys. Listen, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we're doing album reviews and we actually have our series called Everything We Know where we take you guys through the whole album rollout of the hottest releases of the year. Not only that, guys, but our Patreon plan is now live. You guys can access that in the bio. I appreciate you guys and I'll see you on the next one.